I will be away for a few days. As you may recall, those of you who pay attention to what I would have said early on, approximately 1 year ago from this very podium, I returned from a trip to the United States where I indicated that I had undergone some extensive medical examination following upon my local examination. And on that occasion, I was fortunate to report to you that I had a good report, and my doctors abroad had indicated that all things were well, not regarding my local concerns, and that I should be re-examined again in a year's time. At that forum, I did raise the question of managing prostate health and appeal to local men to make sure that you be examined on an appropriate basis, because the records will show that it is one of the major public health issues in Trinidad and Tobago among Afro-Trinidad men in particular. That being so, a year has passed, and I'm now on my way back to the medical centers where I'll be examined, and I trust that all will be well, and I expect to be back here at the end of next weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a cabinet meeting last Wednesday, Thursday being a holiday, and that meeting was a very important one, involving more than usual extensive cabinet discussion, because it was coming to the end of a process which would have resulted in us taking certain far-reaching decisions. You may recall that last year, December, I did not do as I had expected, address the nation at Christmas, but I did reserve that address and address the nation in January. And that address to the nation was specific on the issue of Petrotrin. In that address to the nation, I pointed out the seriousness of the state of Petrotrin and the concerns that we had about Petrotrin, and the need to address it very directly and urgently. However, the government proceeded against that understanding of the concerns that I mentioned in that address. The government proceeded to appoint a high-level committee to go into Petrotrin and to extract from it all of the information to which my address pointed. That committee was chaired by Permanent Secretary Selwyn Lashley, and included persons from the Ministry of Finance, the labor movement, and persons experienced in the industry. They submitted a report, and when that report was submitted, the cabinet received it and subjected the report to a response from Petrotrin, from the Ministry of Finance, and from the Ministry of Energy. And in that process, the subcommittee of energy of the cabinet, which I chair, that committee being a large body of persons from the energy sector and other sectors and the ministries, those deliberations went over the original concerns and the commentary of the report and the further details that came back. And that exercise confirmed my concern and the nation's concern as expressed in the January address. The cabinet then continued to examine the situation of Petrotrin and the national situation. And on Wednesday, a decision was taken at cabinet to begin the process of restructuring Petrotrin and converting Petrotrin in the shortest possible time from being a ward of the state to an oil company that does not only conduct sustainable business, but conducts business that is profitable and will continue to contribute profits and other benefits to the national economy. To do that, it requires a certain amount of resolution, a certain amount of robust examination, and a certain amount of acceptance that the situation is very serious. By very serious, I mean, in the operation of its business, Petrotrin has incurred significant liabilities which the company cannot now discharge, and those liabilities fall to be discharged by the Minister of Finance, even as the Minister of Finance is struggling to pay other expenses in the country. Those liabilities in the form of huge debts, the first of which comes due in 2019, and the Minister of Finance is currently undertaking activities to repay $850 million in one single payment due by Petrotrin. A similar payment of not such a large size, but of a similar nature, looms just beyond that payment a bit later on. And against that background, Petrotrin's oil production has been falling considerably. Its infrastructure is very worrisome because it is dated and in many instances could any day see significant problems arising with respect to safety and loss of product into the Gulf of Paria, polluting Venezuelan coastline with huge consequences and so on. And of course, we have issues with respect to the whole question of its effectiveness and efficiency. We have a refinery which is refining oil, and at this point in time with oil prices mad where it is, we lose oil, we lose a few dollars US on every barrel of oil we refine. And of course, the whole question of the sustainability of an arrangement where currently, because of Petrotrin's dire financial circumstances and lack of working capital, the Minister of Finance is having to provide money to Petrotrin to buy oil, to refine, and lose money on that process. So these are serious matters for the Trinidad and Tobago, which, if not addressed definitively, threaten the very foundation of the country's financial arrangements. And I speak here about downgrading of the national finance arrangements, downgrading on the country as a whole, the country's ability to borrow and the cost of borrowing, and so on and so on. Against that background, an extensive and systematic approach by the Cabinet, which started last January, I can announce this morning that last Wednesday, the Cabinet has taken a decision to install a new board at Petrotrin with a mandate to make the company sustainable, work towards profitability, and to restructure it in the best interest of the national community, taking into account all the competing interests and challenges. The board would include Mr. Wilfred Espine, Mr. Reynol Ajuda Singh, Mr. Nigel Edwards, Mr. Anthony Chantak, Mr. Eustace Nancis, Mr. Joel Harding, Mrs. Linda Rajpal, Mr. Randy Rampasad, and Permanent Secretary Selwyn Lashley. Those 9 people are very, very experienced in their areas of endeavor, in business, some from the private sector, some from the public sector, some with deep experience in energy from Petrotrin itself, others bring other skills. So this team, which we have very carefully selected, has the assignment of treating with this national issue. And we are hoping that within a period of 2 to 3 years, we could turn around the arrangements at Petrotrin so that the company can get out of, or at least be on a path towards making the contribution of its promise. We also have to indicate to you that in doing this, we acknowledge the challenges elsewhere in the national community, especially those challenges of the Ministry of Finance, where we have similar, if not such dire situations in some of our other enterprises. I speak here about WASA, where WASA's payment to its supplier of desalinated water puts WASA in a financial situation which realizes the concerns we had when we entered into desalination as a means of supplying water to the country. And this is a matter, again, for the Minister of Finance. We have Tech, which owes National Gas billions of dollars, which Tech cannot pay at this point in time, and if not paid, would leave the NGC with a bottom line that could reflect itself in the red. So these are the challenges facing the government of Trinidad and Tobago, which are focused upon by the government. They don't make the daily news, but they do attract the attention of the cabinet, and we have been working assiduously on these matters because these are matters that require serious and definitive intervention by the government of the day. So after, before we leave here, the Minister of Finance, or the Minister of Energy, will provide you with the CVs of these people I've mentioned, most of them. Some of them you know, some of them you don't know. But rest assured that they are highly qualified persons to hold the position of the board with the assignment I've just mentioned. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, I must say today, coming out of our 55th anniversary of independence, which took place yesterday, and for which the majority of persons in the country would have observed in one way or the other, either by taking part or by noticing, I must admit that it is with a sense of disappointment that I leave the country today, looking back at the last few days, yesterday and today, because it was not my expectation as a child that at year 55, our young nation would be exposed to what we are exposed to now. All nations have challenges of one kind or another. So it would be ill-advised for our nation to identify our problems as our only circumstance and react to them as though our future cannot be bright. I'm talking here about the behavior of persons in serious national office in Trinidad and Tobago. As Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago today, I want to record in the strongest voice of condemnation the behavior of the opposition in Trinidad and Tobago. Persons who have sought public office have been given that office with the expectation that they will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago as is written and pronounced from the oath of office. Today I condemn the opposition in Trinidad and Tobago for seeking to consistently divide this country and to destroy the institutions which have been constructed to protect us and give us a future. Last year at Independence, I observed a continuation of opposition members who boycott our national celebrations. This year was no different. And as they boycott our celebrations, they carry a conversation that there's nothing to celebrate. Even the poorest countries in the world, countries with pestilence and plague and the threat of war, do not speak of their countries like that. And the people of Trinidad and Tobago are not to tolerate office holders who embark upon destruction of our institutions to speak so unchallenged about a lack of a future for this country. In that very said season, in that very said week, you have a member of parliament, and I speak here about Dr. Rowley Munilal, who has just come out of office as the leader of government business in the government of Trinidad and Tobago, in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. He has made a statement last week, which I find deeply offensive. And before last week, he made a statement earlier on, and I observed it and allowed it to pass, because from the government, we very carefully stay away from commenting on law enforcement as law enforcement take action against individuals. I want to draw to the national community's attention that a couple months ago it might have been, it was in the news that the government had gone to court. And by government, I mean the authorized office of government, I think the Attorney General's office, and a state enterprise had gone to court to complain about persons, might have been about 8 or 10 persons who have been named about their activity or lack thereof with respect to the loss of to the handling of over $400 million at the EMBD. And this was a complaint about a specific sum of money handled at a particular point in time by specific individuals. And the state, through the Attorney General's office, went to the court, presented evidence to the court, and asked the court for orders to seek further information from the persons involved. One of those persons was Dr. Rowley Munilal. And that was police activity. This was the action of the police in Trinidad and Tobago. And when that information came out about the existence of this warrant, and at the top of the warrant was the name Dr. Rowley Munilal, with allegations of misconduct in public office with respect to this specific matter of a $400-odd million, which was handled in July of 2015. It's August of 2015, a couple of weeks before the election. Dr. Munilal made a comment which passed unnoticed by the media and others, but I took notice of it. His comment was that he's warning the police not to allow itself to be used by persons for political means, benefits. Now, that is an alarming statement coming from a member of parliament, a former minister of government, who has questions to answer about the handling of public monies, and for which information was provided to a court in Trinidad and Tobago, and the court, being so satisfied, allowed warrants to be issued on this matter. I find it inexplicable that such a comment could have been made in this country by a person who still holds his post in the parliament and could have made a comment like that without challenge. Today I challenge that statement because he has gone one better. Now that the police, in responding to a development that took place under the last government, and let me remind the national community, under the last government, one day we woke up and the news that came out of the government was that Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar had fired the Attorney General and also fired the Minister of National Security of that government against allegations of wrongdoing that would have taken part on the part of persons in that government. That took place before the last general election, under the instructions and the hand of Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar. The police, under the instructions of the Acting Commissioner Williams, opened an investigation into these matters. And that investigation has been going on and had gone on continuously, to the point where a few days ago, the former Attorney General, Anand Ramlogan, was arrested with respect to charges leveled against him. The media asked me for a comment on that development, and as head of the government, I deliberately and very carefully refused to comment on it because I did not want to fuel any impression that the government had a horse in this race. But I know that law enforcement has its role to play, but I didn't comment. And as far as I'm aware, nobody from this government has commented, and nobody from this government is involved in those investigations, driving it, or encouraging it. This is an investigation that started under the last government and has now reached the point of an arrest of one individual in the first instance. Dr. Moonilal made a comment in response to that arrest, and the comment is what I call a dog whistle, meaning it is a sound to those who will hear it, with its content being clear without being spelled out. He has pointed out, and Dr. Moonilal is no ordinary person. He is a member of Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, a former leader of government business in the House, and an MP of long standing. He is speaking to the world, and he is saying that this is oppression on the part of the government, implying that it is executive action of the cabinet and members of this party, not actions of an independent police, under the guidance of an independent director of public prosecution, where the requirements are for information to be converted into evidence and for evidence to be acted upon under the guidance and watchful eye of the director of public prosecution, a place where the cabinet has no presence or involvement. He is saying that this arrest of his former colleague is political action on the part of the government, and he went further to say it is action against persons of East Indian background, and he named a number of East Indians who had been through the court process and attaches this recent development to it, and is indicating to the country that law enforcement in this country is based on your racial complexion. Today, I condemn that statement, and I call upon the wider national community to take note and to condemn this and similar statements, because it is this kind of statement that creates division in a country like ours, the consequences of which can be quite grave if they go unchallenged. Worse, what Dr. Moonilal was doing was protecting himself, because as he named the persons who had been to court, Mr. Pandey, Dr. Narayan Singh, Chief Justice Sharma, he very carefully didn't name himself. He didn't name himself because while he being currently under a warrant to account for matters under his own portfolio. So what he is doing is seeking to incite flavors of understanding of this development, to make it appear as though the police is acting against East Indians under the direction of this government. And so therefore, when he appears in the court under the warrants that now exist, he will be a victim of this same development. I condemn that, and I call upon all the leaders of this country to condemn this development. It is my understanding, and I'm sure it is the understanding of the vast majority of people in this country, that in Trinidad and Tobago, the police does not take political instructions from political parties to prosecute or persecute any person. In our 55th year of independence, that is the truth in Trinidad and Tobago. Whatever faults our police service may have, it cannot be said and supported by evidence that persons in political authority can direct our police to prosecute persons for wrongdoing, even if the police is so inclined. In the cases before us now, those cases have been overseen by elements of the judiciary and instructions of the Director of Public Prosecution. These are the checks and balances in our system, and inherently our protection from abuse by the executive. And people like Dr. Moonilal ought to be condemned and, treated in a way that this does not take root. Because you see, what is developing here with the behavior of opposition members in totality, in totally boycotting our independence celebrations as a matter of course, bad-mouthing our country as a matter of course, and indicating that they will destroy our institutions as Munilal is trying to do. This is saying to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and should say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that we cannot trust the opposition with our country, we cannot trust them to protect our institutions, and we cannot trust them not to destroy those institutions to protect themselves. They had access to our government to run the country. They distinguished themselves by mass dishonesty and mishandling of public monies. That's a common bit of information in this country, resulting in many of them now having to account to the court for their conduct. And of course, as we seek to build our nation, they take action to destroy the confidence of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That is what I leave as I travel abroad this morning, and that is what makes me sad. Ladies and gentlemen, we as a country, we are going through a very difficult period now. Many people believe that things should be better, and many believe that things could be better. I think we all should hold on to those truths and work together to bring that about. Only yesterday in the president's speech, he called for unity in this country. And I suspect that he too might share my concerns on the matters I've just raised. But one cannot embark on a search for unity in the face of the behavior of the official opposition in Trinidad and Tobago. There are 18 seats in the parliament filled by opposition members. 18 communities voted them into office. And it was painful yesterday to look around the savannah and elsewhere where we had celebrations and not see a single opposition face. That must say something to this country, and it is time that we address this frontally, and I have no difficulty doing so, and I so expect. I'm sure you've come here with some questions which I may want to respond to. If you put your questions now, please. And let's, we don't have much time, so if you have a few questions, I'll take them now.
Dr. Rowley, Keyshawn Haynes, TV6. Let's start with the last point. Are you afraid that, you said that the Dr. Munilal's comments were largely ignored. Are you afraid that now that you've raised them, they become a topic of national discussion, and you may have played into his hand here, and now people are now going to discuss and say, well... No, sir.
These are matters that need to be discussed frontally, and persons who come down on the wrong side of these matters need to be wrongly condemned. This is no time for secrecy. As a matter of fact, when he made the first comment, and I saw it not being engaged, I was concerned that we were accepting these as par for the course in our development. And now we've gone one better. And I think that this is something to be condemned, and if it is being discussed, then I hope that it will result in greater national awareness of the behavior of people like Dr. Munilal.
Just going back to the Petrotrin, can you say if this is a clean slate, a completely new board?
No, 2 members of the last board have been retained, and other members. What we were looking for a particular skill set, and we've in looking at the skill sets, we've brought in new people, and we've kept some people. So it's a mixed board. And may I indicate that out of the long discussion of the cabinet, one of the things that we aim to do is to rotate the board members in such a way that the whole board is not changed at any one time, as is the practice now. But we can't do it on this first occasion. But as we go forward, a certain number of persons could come off the board, a certain number will stay. So at any given point in time, you have continuity on the board. And that is one of the recommendations that came out of that review that I mentioned earlier on, the Lashley review.
Can you say what are some of their short-term goals, and is it any of that having to relate to staff? I know there's an overstaffing problem at Petrotrin.
Well, the short-term goal, first and foremost, is to try and drill for oil. Oil is in the ground, and if you don't drill, you don't get it. Petrotrin has not been drilling, have not been able to drill, largely because, like other things in the company and the company's business, there has been some serious financial constraints. And if you don't treat with those financial constraints, your very existence is to be questioned, because if you cannot drill, an oil company that cannot execute a drilling program to find and bring oil to market is on the wrong track. And secondly, the whole question of the aged infrastructure, which could incur significant liabilities for the country. And by this I mean, every night I go to bed, I must tell you, when I get up in the morning, I wake up feeling, relieved if the news does not say that a line has been broken at Petrotrin and oil has poured into the Gulf of Paria. Because the cost of the cleanup, not only in Trinidad and Tobago's borders, but across in Venezuela, those costs could bankrupt this country if such a thing happens. And the requirement for funding to do these things have to be addressed, and that is priority number one for the board.
I know there was a $16 billion estimate by Mr. Hayward when he said to upgrade everything. Are there any plans to inject some sort of money into that for immediate upgrade? Well,
I wouldn't want to speak to that from this forum and from this platform this morning, but that one doesn't look for a check of $16 billion to do that. It has to be done over time. But what that says is that significant sums of money required to be spent on upgrade of the infrastructure, which will be done over time, starting with the greatest priorities. And that is what the board will be addressing very, very early.
You'll forgive me for jumping, but I know we're short on time. Mr. LaHunt would have been sworn in yesterday. A lot of people are saying that this was a very speedy process to renounce citizenship. Was he given any special concessions by the government, anything to help him move to the front of the line to make sure that this went through?
Has nothing to do with this government. Mr. LaHunt changing his status in Ghana had everything to do with the authorities in Ghana. What happened is that he had to do that when he found out that his advice was not correct. And we did nothing here except to wait for him to come back from Ghana. So there is no question of jumping any line here.
And no question of your confidence in him, in other words, that he misled you in any way. No, you don't have any belief of that?
No, I don't have any such concern, because that is not what happened. He spoke to the media yesterday and he made it quite clear what happened, and I think that explains the situation sufficiently, and Mr. LaHunt remains a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago who can make a major contribution, and I thank him for making himself available, even traveling back and forth across the Atlantic so to do in 48 hours. Thank you.
And my final question, we're reading reports of a shake-up in the special branch. The special branch is the unit that protects you. Do you have any comment on what you would have heard?
No, I don't. I don't speak for the Commissioner of Police. But if the Commissioner has seen the need to adjust his men and women, his officers, I think that is a good thing, and he probably would have done that in conjunction with the National Security Council.
So it's nothing to do with you, and you're not concerned about who may be the new faces coming to protect you?
Remember, I wear two hats, right? I wear the hat of chairman as Prime Minister, and I'm also chairman of the National Security Council. But this matter is a matter for the Commissioner of Police, which would attract the attention of the National Security Council, and we so. Any other question? If not, thank you very much for coming out, and have a good day, and stay safe and dry. I see some hurricanes way out in Cape Verde Islands. I'm going to California. But I'll be in touch along the way. See you again soon. Thank you very much for coming out so early.